What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. VP Tactical here, and today we are doing a Tactical Pontoon trigger upgrade on this Micro Dagger. If you're familiar with any of the things I've ever talked about with the PSA triggers, they're okay. The two-piece split shoe design is not exactly my favorite thing, so let's go ahead and dive in, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And we'll talk real quick just about some of the components that it comes with. So we've got a new trigger shoe. There's going to be a striker spring in here, safety plunger spring, and a trigger return spring. So those are going to be the main components that we're going to be upgrading. The kit does come, this is their Tactical Pontoon Micro Dagger tune-up kit. It does come with some badger snot. I believe this is some lube to put on the friction points. And so what we want to do is go ahead and get our slide off. Of course, we always want to make sure the gun is safe. We're going to depress on the slide, pull the trigger, and then we're going to go ahead and take that apart. And so we're going to be working on two parts of it here. Part of it's going to be on the pistol frame itself, but the majority of it's going to be on the slide. So I like to just strip everything down, take the recoil spring out of there, the barrel, and then what we're going to be focusing on is getting this back plate off. And this is where we're going to do a good chunk of the work in order to access the safety plunger spring, and then also the striker spring here. And so the big first thing is we got to get that plate off in the very back. So what we're going to do, and I'm actually going to put this on a plate. Let's move this out of the way here, or on, excuse me, a armorer's block, just because I have that optic on there. And so ideally what we want to do is push down on this guy in here in this channel and pull forward a little bit. What that's going to do is take tension off the striker spring, and we should be able to pop this rear cover right off. Just be very careful because some of those components can launch out. As you can see, it's starting to pop out on me already. And then release that tension. Now what you're going to see here, we've got the striker assembly. So we're going to move that off to the corner here. And then there's two, if the camera will pick it up here, two little cups that hold that striker assembly in place. Looks like mine's a little dirty, so let's go ahead and wipe that off here real quick. And let's grab our striker spring. We'll move this off to the side for the moment. Easy way to do this, just place this on here. And what we're going to do is pull down on the spring itself, and these two little cups, as they're called, as I'm struggling here with this. Let's try that again. Little pieces should just pop right off. And then those are the two little pieces, they're called cups. Okay? And then the spring will just lift right off. So we take the old spring out, and then we've got our new spring here. So the new spring will go on. And what we're going to do is get those little cups back in, and again, they're tiny. I'm going to put it inside the spring. Okay, there's one. And then we've got number two. And then release the pressure, and if I can get my glove out of there. And there we go. Now we got our new striker spring installed. So there's part one done of that kit. Now you can pull this piece out. I don't think it's necessary, but this is your extractor, excuse me, plunger system. And what we're going to do is depress on this, and this should just pop right out. So we're going to depress on the safety plunger itself, and that piece should just fall right out. The extractor, there we go. Extractor's out. And we're going to slowly release this because it is under tension. And I always like to make sure the orientation of how things come out. So if you see, it's got a rounded edge here and then kind of a flat side on the back. And there we go. So that component's out. You can see that little spring in there. Again, flat side versus rounded. Let's do a little twist, and this should just pop right off. There we go. That piece is out. Let's go ahead and grab our next spring here, if I can get out of this dang package. And it fell out here on the bench, so let's go ahead and grab that. And you notice too, there's definitely a difference in size. It's considerably smaller than the factory one that I just pulled out. If I can find it in a second, I'll show you. Gosh, they're so darn tiny. So here's the factory one, and then here's the aftermarket one. And you can tell there's definitely a bit of a difference in thickness. So this one should be a little bit lighter while still maintaining the factory safety. So again, we're just gonna take this little guy here, and a good method putting this in, just give it a little twist. It may or may not hold or stick in there. We just gotta make sure this thing doesn't get bound up when we go to put it back in. So that's the big key thing. So now that we've got that part done, again, we're gonna look for that flat facing side. See if I can get this back on camera. You see there's that little well in there. What we're going to do is enter that back in. And now we can kind of see through the slide here the spring in there. And what we're going to do is push this. I was struggling with that for a moment. It has to be lined up just exact for that specific cutout. So we're going to push that back down, and then we're going to go ahead and put our extractor back in. I mean, it really goes in only one way. And then once you release the safety plunger, that extractor shouldn't pop out or anything. And there we go. Now it's all back together. So now if I push on that again, it should pop right out. So we're just going to seat that back in, and there we go. And then now we can take our striker assembly, and it only goes in one direction. Okay, so now what we've done is installed the safety plunger spring, and then we've also changed the striker spring as well. And then so what we want to do on this to get that slide plate back on, we're going to go ahead and push down on these components here. It is easier to use a punch, ideally, as I'm not doing it. Use a punch, and this may be a little challenging. I'm using a Glock tool, but push down on that, and then this other one here. So I have to press on that, the striker assembly, to release pressure on the back plate here, and then we're also going to push down on that mechanism. Let's get it off this slippery surface here. So we're going to just depress this. And then you should feel it where it starts to go in, and then that little plate should just snap right in. There we go. So I ended up getting that back in. I just had to put a little bit of forward pressure. It looked like it was hanging up just a little bit on the lip there, just from the pressure of the spring and everything. But the big key thing that you want to make sure, you do your safety checks. And of course, folks, if you don't feel comfortable doing this, take it to an armorer or certified gunsmith. But basically, what I want to see here is we pull back on the striker, that it's not dropping forward, right? And then when we depress the safety plunger here and we push forward, then we should see the firing pin poke out and it stay there until we pull it back, and then you hear that reset of the safety plunger. And that's that. So now, again, just to reiterate, we've changed out the striker spring and safety plunger spring. So let's go ahead and jump into the lower half of the unit, so the receiver itself, and this is where we're going to change the trigger shoe and then also the trigger return spring. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. Really, it's just two main things. We've got a pin here and then this pin here. So I'm going to go ahead and knock those out, pull this out, and then we'll dive into that other piece. So just to show you. So what you want to use is ideally a punch on this, and we're going to go ahead and give it a couple of love taps. Once we get that through, should see that pin's mostly pulled out. We actually have to hit it a few more times just to get it the rest of the way. There we go. Okay. And that pin's down here. We want to keep that, retain it, set it off to the side. And then we're going to grab our small punch. pin's going to pop out. And we can move this off to the side, and then this whole assembly should just pop right out. So watch out for some of these other components here, like this guy. Okay, we're going to put that back in. And then what we're going to do now is drive out. There's a pin here that we're going to have to knock out. Boy, oh boy, this thing get dirty. Again, we're going to quick wipe with some of these parts. If we're in here, otherwise, might as well do it anyway. That is a tiny pen, so we're going to use a tiny punch. Actually, might even go smaller than that one. 1/16. I always like to go right to left. Okay, so knock that pin out, and then the assembly should just pop right off. And there we go. Now we've got that guy off. Let's go ahead and wipe this down. Let's get our new trigger shoe. And what we're going to want to do, put a little bit of blue Loctite on the Allen head screw here. Just a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. Okay, you can see that Allen head screw. There we go. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to put on a little bit of blue Loctite and then grab my Allen wrench here, and we're going to get this put together. Alright, so what we're going to go ahead and do is get this inserted into here. Okay, we're going to flip this over. And always make sure you have that little safety lever tab indexed forward. Like I said, we've got a little blue Loctite on here. Oh, this just comes gooping out. Okay, and that's way too much. So we're just going to dab up a good chunk of that. Make sure as long as we got it on the screw, that's all that matters. And we're going to go ahead and tighten this up. And what we want to do is check to make sure that we've got an engagement there. Yep, it's in. And then once I've got it tightened down, I'll go ahead and clean up the excess. Okay. And there we go. Now we've got our new trigger shoe installed. And on to the next step. Okay, and the next step now is going to remove the trigger bar, which if you kind of rock it, you'll see it kind of pop out of that tab there. And the whole assembly should lift right out, and it's attached now to the trigger return spring. So we're going to go ahead and remove that trigger return spring. Oh, it looks like it just popped off right from there. So that makes life easier. And then we can slip it right off of this guy here. And there we go, trigger return spring off. New trigger return spring is going to go on. So we just clip that guy onto here. And then we're going to clip that onto this guy back here. These parts are tiny, so it's a little hard to, a little bit more challenging to get these on sometimes. Okay, we got that. Alright, so we've got this spring on here, and then we're going to go ahead and clip the other one to the actual, or loop it into the other one. And then with this, we're going to kind of keep some tension on there so none of this pops off. And we're going to just rock this back into place. And there we go. And now you can see this is the surface where the trigger bar runs over the disconnector, and that's really where you want to put your badger snot. So we're going to go ahead and open up some of this. right, now we've got some worked in there, and we can go ahead and put this all back together. So all we're going to do is just the reverse. We're going to go ahead and put those pins back in, put this back into the frame, and let's do that now. Okay, trigger assembly is in. So that locking block popped up. We need to put our slide release mechanism back into place here. This part can be a little tricky, getting everything lined up just correctly. And that's where, again, that big pin's going to go in. Some of this you might just have to fuss with a little bit, especially if the trigger's just out of alignment. That can cause some problems. There we go, see? And actually didn't have to hammer that back in. It's indexed, so the pin will actually hold itself in place. And then what we'll want to do is grab that small pin, and we're just going to drive that one back in, make sure everything's seated back in the rear. This isn't going to pop off, it's actually in there because you want to line that up when you're putting in that pin. And then this last one, we're just going to give some love taps with the... I try to make sure it's even on both sides, so here as well as here. So looks good to me. Let's go ahead and put this back together. We'll go ahead and put our barrel in, our recoil spring, and slide back on. Damn. And there you go, boys and girls. There's your Tactical Pontoon trigger installed on your Glock, or excuse me, Palmetto State Armory Micro Dagger. Hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know what your thoughts are.